Hello and welcome to the Hawthorne Handmade Guide to Satin Stitch. This guide accompanies our kits, instructions and online guide, but if you just found us anyway, welcome. This is a beginner's guide to satin stitch, so we're going to learn all the basics and get you started with this amazing stitch. So without further ado, let's jump in.
So first off, what is satin stitch? A satin stitch is a filling stitch. So you can see here on this piece, it's been used to totally fill in the whole design. Every bit of this design is done in satin stitch, and it's a repeat of stitches that sit next to each other. You can do lots with it, as you can see here, going in different directions and kind of different effects. So to get started, I've just got a few shapes here that we're going to fill in. You don't want to start at the edge of a piece, you want to try and start in the middle and then work outwards from there. So you're going to bring the needle up and then take it across to the other side of the shape that you are filling in with this colour, just like that. You're then going to come back up next to the beginning of that stitch. So at the bottom there, you come up right next to it, not in the same hole obviously, but as close to next to it as you can manage, and then go back down right next to the stitch at the top, again just next to it, not in the same hole. You're then going to repeat this process and you're essentially looping the thread up and around the fabric. So you're coming up and then back down at the top, filling in the space that you've got there. What you really want to try and do is aim for the threads to sit quite neatly next to each other. You're aiming to avoid any large gaps, so you can always go back in and fill a little gap in later on if you spot one. And you're aiming to avoid the threads sitting right on top of each other. So just trying to get those needles up next to each previous stitch. Spend a bit of time doing this. There's no rush with anything with stitching, just take your time. As you can see here, every now and then I'm just repositioning just to make sure that I'm going in the right space. So what you can also see here is the shape isn't a regular shape, it's not just a square. So what I'm doing is following those lines. I'm just bringing the needle up where the line is and then back down at the top there. And as long as you follow the lines, you really shouldn't have any problems. This is a colouring in stitch, and if you think of it like that, just keep within the lines and you should be fine. If you're working with a piece a bit like our kits that's got the lines printed on the fabric, if you come up just outside of the line and then make your stitch, you'll be covering up those lines and they won't show at the end, so you shouldn't have any problems with that. So you can see here I'm just working this block of pink and it's nicely filling in this section. You want to try and keep your stitches nice and even in terms of your tension and keep your fabric taut as well. So try and, rather than pulling one tight and then the next loose, try and avoid that. When you've got to the end of a bit of thread, you can just weave the thread in on the back of those stitches. Just a couple of weaves there and snip off the excess. Nice and easy. Okay, so once you've done one section, you're going to need to perhaps change colour and work your next section. You always aim to work from one side of a piece to the other. That's either from bottom to top, top to bottom, left to right, etc. Whatever feels best for you. But rather than hopping around, try and do one section after the next. So here what I've done is come up at the top line and then I'm going down into those previous stitches, just along that line of where those previous stitches were. What that's going to give you on satin stitches is really lovely dip in between each section of stitching where the two threads meet. And it's so much easier to do it this way than try and come up where the stitches already are and go back down on the line. So we're coming up on the line and back down on those previous stitches. It just gives you a really neat finish. On here I'm stitching all in the same direction, but you can change the direction. You can stitch long ways, lengthways, different angles, whatever you fancy trying. And on our kits we show you which angles you might want to have a go at doing the different shapes in. So here I'm going to show you how to do surface satin stitch. So up to now we've been going looping around the fabric and it looks the same on the front and back. For longer stretches where you're having to take the thread a bit further, you can do surface satin stitch. And what you see I've done here, rather than coming all the way back around again, I've come back up right next to where I've just taken that stitch down. So I've just gone down and then I'm coming right back up next to it, not in the same hole because you'll lose the stitch, but back down and in just right where you've just gone. And then the same here. So you're making teeny little stitches on the back of the piece and the long stitches on the front. That's why it's called surface satin stitch, because you're just doing the satin stitch on the surface. You'll see here I lose a stitch because I accidentally came back up the same hole. Don't worry if you do that, just carry on. And this is, say, really good for if you're doing long stretches of stitching. And saves on thread as well, so that's great. You can see here on the back, on the standard satin stitch looks the same. The surface, you've got the gap where you've just got those teeny little stitches, top and bottom. Another thing you might need to do is fill in a big space, and you want to make sure all the stitches are going in the same direction. Good way to do this is to split the space up before you start doing your full satin stitches. So here I'm just going to split this space up into about 6 even pieces. And then what you do is fill in each section one by one. And that means that all of those stitches are going to be nice and neatly going in the exact same direction once you fill each chunk in. So you're essentially just adding a little bit to the design to help you make sure you keep your stitches straight. If you're stitching a piece, you haven't done this and your stitches start to go off on a bit of an angle, that's perfectly normal. I really like that effect, especially when you're doing a design that's kind of got natural elements in it, like ours, like with fields and the sea, etc. Having those slightly wavy stitches I think can look really nice, but if you want to make sure you've got a nice even finish, this is a really good way to do it. So you see I've just spaced all those out, and then you can just work each section by section. So that's a very quick introduction to satin stitch. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and happy stitching!